It's time now for business. Let's say hello to Kate Moody.
Hi, Francois.
No agreement among congressional leaders on a new bailout plan, and thus we're getting word of more layoffs, lots of layoffs.
Yeah, big numbers here. This is just a day after Disney announced it was going to be cutting 28,000 jobs. Now American and United Airlines are beginning to lay off some 32,000 staff members. Federal aid for that sector ran out at midnight, and with it, the condition that payroll remain intact. Congress has so far failed to agree new funding for the aviation sector. With air traffic still some 70% below normal levels, airlines have said they have no choice but to shed jobs, but that they could recall those employees if lawmakers come up with more financial support soon. Well, meanwhile, the number of Americans claiming unemployment benefits decreased slightly last week. 837,000 new claims were reported by the Labor Department. That's 36,000 fewer than the previous week, but it's still well above pre-pandemic levels. California, meanwhile, has suspended the processing of its new applications for about 2 weeks to combat fraud, and that could distort some of the data coming out. Well, for some analysis, we can speak to Elizabeth Crofoot, a senior economist at the Conference Board in New York. Thanks for being with us on France 24. Now, we've got these slightly contradictory sets of data today. Weekly unemployment claims relatively steady, while tens of thousands of people are being put out of work. What picture does that paint of the U.S. labor market?
Right. It's really difficult to get a good reading from the initial unemployment data right now. There are largely claims that these data have become increasingly unreliable. States are really mired by backlogs, by outdated systems, and now fraud. So it's difficult to get that full picture of the labor market. I think what's better will be to look at some of the data that's coming out tomorrow from the unemployment numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the jobs report. So that will give us a better indication of what this labor market recovery is really amounting to. It'll give us a better signal. So we are expecting, some continued job gains, but relative to what we've seen in the past, these strong numbers that we would consider strong are really going to be, it's relative to how we were performing in the past. And we do see that there is a slowing down of job gains, and we expect that going forward.
So we are seeing more jobs being added. About half of all the jobs that were lost during the lockdown have been recovered. But is this improvement that we saw in recent months plateauing, or are we likely to see a lot of people out of work really for the medium to long term here?
Right. I mean, it's interesting that we were nearly a 15% unemployment rate in April, down to 8.4% in August. And a lot of those low-hanging fruit of job gains have already been picked over the summer. These businesses are really staying afloat because of the historic fiscal stimulus, right? Those PPP loans. Also, consumers that were benefiting from supplemental on insurance payments, for example, those extra $600 a week, and also direct payments from the government. So they were really spurring additional consumption. Now that that fiscal aid has expired for both businesses and consumers, they're not going to be able to spend as much money, which does not bode well for businesses. They're probably going to be seeing increased pressure to, make ends meet. Many of these businesses, especially restaurants, have very small margins. They're not going to be able to continue at 90% capacity even. So they're going to have to continue to cut their payrolls in order to survive, if not completely close shop, especially as the weather turns and they're not able to continue operations, socially distant operations outdoors.
Are we seeing a shift in the kinds of jobs that are available in the recruitment that is happening at the moment?
Well, we've seen that a lot of the technology sector, for example, has really benefited from the rise in e-commerce and other people and people working from home and remote learning. That entire sector has really benefited. So we are seeing increased demand for those types of occupations. But as some of the other sectors start to shift in terms of reopening, we have seen, for example, warehousing jobs have been increasing. Also, grocery stores. Those are sectors that continue to gain momentum because we're seeing lockdowns, open and close. That sort of yo-yo effect is causing the demand for labor to also yo-yo in that same way.
And we're seeing unemployment, of course, much higher for minorities and women. In many ways, they're bearing the brunt of this economic crisis.
Right, definitely. Women in general, over the summer, we did see that there was a lot of women that had to make decisions about whether to return to the labor force or not. I mean, a lot of women have children that they have to take care of. I mean, there's also fathers, obviously, right? But research has shown that it's mostly the woman that's taking a predominant responsibility for caretaking at home. So they're having to make tough decisions and potentially really um, not being able to continue into the fall, as many schools are also doing remote learning.
All right, Elizabeth Crofoot, senior economist at the Conference Board, thanks so much for joining us on France 24.
Thank you.
We've just got time to check in on the day's trading action now. Wall Street is trending higher as investors hope for some signs of progress on that stimulus bill on Capitol Hill. Tech stocks are leading gains. The Nasdaq up about 1%, about halfway through this trading session. We saw a mixed close for the major European indices. The DAX closing slightly below the flat line in Frankfurt. Bayer shares plunged 13% after the German pharmaceutical giant lowered its guidance for the rest of the year. Unemployment across the Eurozone, meanwhile, increased slightly in August to about 8.1%.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit has already been picked when it comes to U.S. jobs. That's a sobering thought.
It absolutely is. It means that we've seen some signs of improvement, but obviously quite a long way to go.
All right, Kate Moody, many thanks. We'll have more business news for you later.